Welcome to Oh the Humanities, a podcast produced by the University of New England Center for Global Humanities. Our conversations are devoted to shining a light on the important work being done in the humanities at UNE and other colleges across the U.S. and around the world. My name is Josh Pahigian, and I'm your host. My guest today is University of New England political science professor Brian Duff, whose new book, Restaurant, is the latest publication in Bloomsbury Academics' Object Lessons series, which aspires to reveal the hidden lives of ordinary things. Brian is joining me in the production studio, on UNE's beautiful Biddeford campus. In Restaurant, Brian draws from his experiences as a server, newspaper restaurant critic, and political theorist to explore the particular sort of conversations that restaurants make possible, those deeper ones that we so often avoid in other spaces. And we'll get to talking about the book in short order. But first, let's meet our guest. Brian, welcome to Ode to the Humanities.
Hey, thanks for inviting me, Josh. I'm happy to be here.
My pleasure. It's a wonderful book, and I'm really looking forward to digging into it. First, to give our listeners some context, though, I thought I would begin by reading the inside jacket description of the book. So here goes. In the last few decades, restaurants and food culture have achieved extraordinary cultural presence. Chefs are heroes and thought leaders. Well-executed entrees go viral. Dining out has become theater. Plating has become art and ubiquitous Instagram content. But in recent years, restaurants have faced crisis upon crisis. Restaurant takes a deep dive into the drives, desires, and anxieties we bring to dining out at this time of uncertainty. It explores the meaning we find in good food and warm hospitality. It shows why the restaurant offers unique opportunities to change the quality of our engagement with others and to create shared meaning across the table. Brian, when you were waiting tables many years ago, or when you were writing reviews for the Portland Phoenix or the Boston Phoenix, did you ever think someday you'd write a book about restaurants? Or how did the idea, and when did the idea come to you that this lifelong engagement with restaurants in different roles might be preparing you to write a book like this?
Yeah, well, when I did work in restaurants, it would never have occurred to me, which is, I met unbelievable characters, and I started working in restaurants when I was maybe 16, and I'd just been like a kid passing through the grades in school, and then all of a sudden it was like a tsunami of crazy characters. And it's funny to me that it never occurred to me to think about writing something about them. But then, of course, I started becoming a critic after I went to grad school. I was, at that time, working on my first book, which is a political theory book about family. And I did, as a critic, I really thought I kind of wanted to, I wouldn't say reinvent, but I wanted to tweak the genre of food criticism for sure. Get some sort of philosophical ideas in there. I think I annoyed a lot of readers with it.
How would you characterize the types of pieces you wrote for the Portland Phoenix, for example? How were they different from a typical restaurant review?
Well, okay, so every review had a theme. And the theme was usually some spin-off of either the kind of cuisine or even the name of the restaurant. But I would sort of start with some big philosophical idea, then get into the restaurant review, what they serve and what the service is like, and then wrap it up at the end. But I really tried to weave the theme through the whole thing. And I remember my girlfriend, when the reviews came out, she would always skip the first paragraph because she didn't give a crap, read about the food, and then skip the end. And I'd be like, read the theme. I think a lot of readers are like that. And I do think in the end, some of the ideas I developed way back then are in the book. And I think it works a lot better as a book. People, when they open a book, they're ready to kind of engage your ideas for a while. I had some great ones, and I had some that probably were, I should have just stuck to the food. It's week after week, so I was constantly experimenting. But I tried to have fun with it.
And you got some free meals along the way, I assume.
Many, many free meals. And as you know, it went on for, I think I did it for 17 years.
Wow.
And as you know, the book gets into some of the real anxiety of eating at restaurants as well as the pleasures of eating at restaurants. And certainly one of the anxieties is paying for the meal. Mm-hmm. And if you eat for free for 17 years, all that anxiety hits you at once. And the first time I realized oh my God,
I'm going to have to pay today.
Yeah, it's really difficult. And I do eat out much less now.
I bet. So it's a small book fitting comfortably into one's hand at about 5 by 6 inches, perfect for reading at the table. I read it in the course of just a couple sittings. But it sure packs a lot into its sandwich-sized physique. You adroitly weave together strands from heavy thinkers like Hannah Arendt and Alexis de Tocqueville, Sartre, Nietzsche, and others, along with reflections on contemporary politics, Donald Trump and the movement he leads, how COVID changed eating out, how films and literature treat the topic of dining out, animal cruelty and ethical sourcing, the prominence of celebrity chefs in our culture. There's so many different themes in the book. And for the purpose of making them a little bit more digestible, if you will, for our listeners, I'm just going to kind of try to disentangle them a little bit, and then you could put them back together in your answers if you want. So let's start where you do, and actually where you end too, with My Dinner with Andre, the early 1980s film that exemplifies some core ideas from the book. How did you use that film as a frame for the book, and why is it important to the ideas you're trying to convey?
Yeah. Well, one thing that happened was I'd written sort of a draft of the book, an earlier draft that was much more, I think, on the cynical side. And then I hooked up with object lessons, and I was rewriting the book to make it fit, make it shorter, kind of make it fit the themes of the series better. And one thing I noticed is that on their website, it said that most object lessons books start with like some personal anecdote or something. And I'm like allergic to personal anecdotes.
And that was actually from your childhood, right? You recalled your parents, I think,
I was
going
like,
to the film.
I had this memory of when I was a little kid, my parents it was pretty rare that they got a babysitter. My sisters and I were kind of notorious in the neighborhood. And got a babysitter. They were going out and they were going to go to dinner and they were going to see a movie. And they told us, like, yeah, in this movie, these two men just sit in a restaurant and talk. And my sisters and I were like, what? We just couldn't imagine that. And then in the morning, we asked them, like, how was the movie? And they tried to make us understand why it was an interesting movie. And I just couldn't. I think I was 9 at the time. But now I've seen it, and it is like it really stands out as this example of like what adult conversation can be. And Jenny Odell, who's this really interesting thinker about what we do with our attention in these days, she cites it sometimes as this like the goal is to have that kind of conversation that Wally and Andre have at dinner. And so so I start with an anecdote. I write these many, many themes into the book, like you said. And then rewatching the movie, I got my hands on the script too, so I could really study it. Like I saw that many, many of the themes that I developed in the book are right there in the movie, right there in the conversation. Andre and Wally are working on these aspects of what it is to be human as well. But they miss one or two things, I think, about being in a restaurant, including the fact that they don't seem to care that they're in a restaurant. They don't seem to enjoy the cuisine. They don't seem to have any thoughts about the hospitality. So I end the book sort of trying to weave all the themes together through their conversation.
So at the heart of the book, as well as that idea that restaurants enable a deeper sort of conversation, there's also the idea that restaurants satisfy this innate desire we have to be nurtured, to be nourished, or as a character in Harold Pinter's play, which you quote in the book, The Celebration, as the play puts it, the restaurant's like a womb. Can you expand on that idea a little bit? It's almost like an infantile need that the restaurant says.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, so I'm like, I have become over the years a true believer in I wouldn't call it Freudian, but I would call it sort of like this quasi-Freudian idea that what our experiences when we're infants, our experience when we're toddlers, the experience of being cared for, just has a profound, profound effect on us for the rest of our lives. And one thing I liked about that I was writing for object lessons is that my favorite kind of thinking about these topics has this very awkward label called object relations theory. And my favorite writer in that genre is this feminist theorist, Dorothy Dinnerstein. And there's something about being in a restaurant when it's going well, when the food feels nourishing and when your needs are being attended to, and when, if you need something from the server sees you put your finger up or whatever, when it's warm, it really calls up those emotions of feeling cared for. I think I had that, in the back of my mind. But as I did a lot of the reading and research for this book, I just found that person after person, when they stop and really dig deep into what is like most meaningful about the restaurant experience, they describe it in very similar terms. So some of the people I cite, are like Vincent Cunningham, who writes for The New Yorker, and Adam Gopnik in his book about restaurants, and the new food critic for The New York Times, Tehel Rao, when she's a terrific writer about restaurants, and she often taps into this too. But there's, as you know, there's many, many, many examples. And there is, when it goes well, the restaurant can feel really magic. And I really am convinced that magic has to do with the way it kind of just recreates and calls up those childhood experiences.
I think for me, it kind of nourishes my needs as an adult too, because usually when I'm cooking at home, I'm like jumping up a million times to get things for my kids, and then looming over the meal is the fact that I have to clean up afterwards. So I kind of bask in not having to do all those things as an adult, but I can definitely see that need we have just to be cared for is met through the restaurant.
Well, just on that point, Josh, like I do one especially at the end of the book when I talk about Levinas and hospitality. Like one thing I think the restaurant does do is, even as it taps into these childhood feelings, it sets us up for certain adult experiences that we become pretty adept at avoiding. And one is like hospitality, right? It is a huge pain to like invite people over, clean the house, cook, make them feel cared for. Have that dinner party where like the conversation sparkles. I don't know what it's like because I've never hosted one in my life.
By mid-meal, you're like, okay, how long till they leave? I can put my sweatpants on and kick back. Yeah,
exactly.
Load the dishwasher and move on. Yeah.
And the restaurant, like, if you get your friends on the group text together and you're like, heard about this place, it's supposed to be amazing, let's go. And you just are the one who had the energy to make it happen. It gives us this like much more accessible form of that, what is really an important part of being an adult human, which is showing hospitality for other people. So I do think it does allow us to do these adult things even after it taps into these childhood things, and maybe do them differently because it taps into these childhood experiences.
So let's switch gears just a little bit, and if we can, maybe channel our inner Sherry Turkle. And in the book, you talk about the intrusion of technology into our relationships and also into our restaurants. And I'm thinking of one experience I had recently, and I was thinking about your book actually as I had the experience, so it was kind of neat. So I sat down at a restaurant with a group of people, and the hostess handed us what I thought were going to be our menus. And what we got instead was a laminated piece of paper with a QR code on it to scan the code and see the menu on our phone. So the five of us sat there looking at our phones, very isolating for me at least, and very individualized experience. I couldn't lean over and say, oh, this looks interesting, or what exactly is that? I don't know that ingredient. I felt I wasn't experiencing the comfort and joy that I expected to find at a restaurant. But I suppose technology has been intruding in our restaurant spaces in different forms for years. First, it was sports bars, but later even a lot of restaurants have the game on TV, or we had the jukebox way back when. Some restaurants now, there's a popular pizza chain in Maine that you have a little TV right at your table, so everyone's got their own little screen. So it's nothing new, but I was just wondering what your thoughts were on technologies, if you could expand on your thoughts on technologies, capacity to limit the quality of our engagements at restaurants, or can it also enhance them?
So fundamentally, I like the thing that you experienced where technology just, even in this kind of small way, intruded on the restaurant experience, right? Where instead of like, you leaning over and looking at the menu with your companion, you're all stuck in your phones. Like that, to me, that shows what's good about the restaurant experience. The fact that even that little intrusion seems to be ruining something, like the thing it's ruining is something that's actually really nice. And I do think almost every one of these intrusions of technology, it can hurt the experience a little bit. And there was a guy, very, very clever guy, who wrote the reviews for the New York Times for many years, Pete Wells. And in his final review, he talked about this aspect, how technology, the way we get reservations now tends to be just much more online experience. You don't call someone who's standing in the restaurant. And ways you order your food, people also ordering online and taking away is much more common, especially at sort of the backbone of American restaurants. There's these like fast casual chains like Olive Garden and stuff, and people aren't sitting down as much there. They're getting their food to go. And he said, we're in danger of losing the last human place, is how he described the restaurant. Because it is this place where you can go in, you can expect, like, I'm not going to use my phone for a while. It's like a certain ritual where you kind of expect yourself to sort of put the phones away, look each other in the face. Someone's going to talk to you about the food and be able to answer your questions. And this, it's kind of part of what makes it wonderful. And I do think technology is getting in there in all these ways. And but it's going to make it all the more valuable when you find that place where it works. And the TVs, I have this good friend, Vlad, who I think in the book, because he came along with many reviews, I've known Vlad for 30 years. And the first time we ever went out somewhere with Vlad where there was a TV in the corner, like, Vlad was gone. And his girlfriend at the time, was now his wife, was like, oh yeah, Vlad's, if there's a screen, he's just...
It's in the tube zone.
Yeah, and it's still true to this day. And so, you have to, if you're going to talk to Vlad, you got to pick a place with no TV. And so I think, it highlights what's great about the restaurant when it's great, that the technology feels so much like an invasion there.
Yeah. So another societal force that's changed our restaurants, I would say, it was the COVID era mitigation efforts. Suddenly we were eating in, getting takeout. We were eating out on the sidewalk. We were getting drinks to go. Do you think we've fully recovered yet from the way COVID changed restaurants, or did it change restaurants for good in terms of just our level of engagement and our tendency, as you were saying a minute ago, to opt for takeout more often than eating in? So I haven't been a food critic basically since COVID hit. But everything that I've kind of like read about and noticed is that I think there was a lot of pessimism about the future of restaurants at that time. The inflation that followed COVID, these days you hear a lot about this idea that immigrants are going to be rounded up and deported. They are the backbone of the restaurant industry, and even more so the agricultural industry that makes the food sourcing for restaurants. Yeah.
Nonetheless, all the statistics show that restaurants have actually done quite well in general. Not individual particular restaurants, but as an industry, people keep going. Prices have gone way up. Not everywhere, but at I wouldn't even say high end, but above that fast food, fast casual rate. But it seems like the experience is important enough to people that they are going to keep going, and the percentage of people's income that they spend on food away from home it grows every year. Now some of that food is takeout, but it seems it really seems like that experience of going to restaurants is important enough to people that they're willing to overcome a lot, including they kept going to restaurants during COVID if they could, including people who should have known better, like Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, who would love to be president, broke his own COVID rules to get a fancy dinner at French Laundry.
I remember that. Yeah.
He wasn't the only one. So it's that people crave the experience, and it seems like in Portland, one thing that's happened that a lot of restaurants have closed every year since COVID. But what the Portland Food Map, this guy Nestes who runs the Portland Food Map, observed is for everyone that closes, more than one opens up, but they tend to be smaller. And so we're losing some of these big restaurants. I don't know if you've ever been to like Local 188 up in Portland, huge place.
Yeah.
And we're getting these smaller ones. And I do think very often, for me at least, some people maybe love the big room and the buzz, but my best experiences are often at these small restaurants.
More intimate,
one server sometimes.
Yeah.
I write in the book about a place called Schulten Air in Portland, this German restaurant. And it's just this German couple who moved to Maine. They make this incredible food. I don't know if she still works there, but they used to have this server who spoke fluent German, and she could get all the words just right. And a little place, magical place. I used to love Yobo in Portland, which is a very similar Korean place. So it, in a way, if it seems like the restaurants are surviving.
And maybe we get more variety as restaurants get smaller,
Yeah.
a little bit lower overhead. So those are two of your Portland favorites.
Yeah.
What are one or two more? And if you have a guest from out of town visiting, you only have one meal to take them to, where do you go in Portland?
Oh, you're talking about in Portland?
Yeah.
Well, those are two that Yobo closed.
Okay.
And actually, the couple that ran Yobo, they run the wine bar in Saco now.
Oh, okay.
If you're ever driving by, nice place. Very good hospitality there. But, in Portland, what did I love? I liked this one in my neighborhood called, two in my neighborhood. I lived on the east side, Blue Spoon and Bar Lola. And they both were, Blue Spoon especially was small, but Bar Lola also sort of like, it was just like, had that warm atmosphere. I always thought this place called The Well, which is on a farm in South Portland, Jordan's Farm, where you eat outside of picnic tables, but the cuisine is really elevated. I always recommend that to people too. Yeah.
So in the book, you mentioned several films. We already talked about My Dinner with Andre. Ratatouille gets a mention. Have you seen the film The Menu, the 2022 film? It's Ralph Fiennes and I believe Anya Joy Taylor, and it's a sadistic chef who's renowned for being very exclusive. His restaurant's in an island, and his plan is to expose all of the diners for being incredibly self-centered, and by the end of the night to kill them all. It's a horror / kind of funny film. I don't know, / comedy, we'll say. But I don't think you talk about that one in the book. But I'm just curious, the idea or the moral behind that for me was just that maybe we're a little self-centered in expecting to be pampered in the way we've talked about. And we've talked about it as a very positive thing. But is there something myopic or something just a little bit too selfish about wanting to enjoy a good meal, or am I misreading the moral of that movie?
I have a few things to say about that.
Yeah.
So one, let me put it this way. That movie a little bit is like the restaurant worker's perspective on the customers, right? Because he has total contempt for these customers. And of course, he's serving this insanely expensive cuisine. You go to this private island. When I was a waiter, and was always in the kitchen talking to the chefs, like there was a ton of that. And customers could drive you up the wall. Some of my customers are quite delightful, but you can get really cynical about the demanding people who eat at restaurants when you're the one hustling and try to serve them. And you see it all the time. And honestly, I think as a food critic, I got a little bit. What is the word for it? I just got a little, I used to always ask to taste the wine before I ordered the glass of wine. And it would occasionally drive my companions crazy. They're like, just order the wine. You don't need to taste the wine. But I would always say, is it possible I could try that? And it's a little bit annoying, but I wanted to know if I was going to enjoy this wine before I tasted it. So 100%. And I hope the book does justice to the cynical side of looking at our obsession with just this is so yummy and indulging ourselves. And there's a lot of reasons to be cynical, and I do try to do justice to it in the book. But about that movie. Yeah. So, and also Ratatouille, because the two go together.
I mentioned it, so go ahead.
Yes. So the climax of Ratatouille is when Anton Ego, the critic, eats this ratatouille, and I don't know if you remember what happens, but all of a sudden there's
back to his childhood.
back to his childhood,
Yes.
back to being cared for by his mother. And it really, to me, like, that's one of the things that gets at, like, that's where the magic of the restaurant
And that's
comes
the
from.
climax of the menu too, right?
Well, in the menu,
Similar.
there's only one customer who he allows to live. I can't remember the details. Oh, spoiler alert, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's in part because she doesn't want pretentious, refined adult food. She just wants him to serve a cheeseburger. And he remembers when he was a young chef and he was just flipping burgers. And there's something about it like that, like just that, like, this is the comfort food of my childhood. It's all I want. And he respected that. And so both those movies, to me, kind of confirm this suspicion I have that was really going on as this childhood stuff.
How interesting. I'm glad you could tie those two together because I could totally see that. Before we stepped into the studio here an hour ago, before you got here, I was talking to one of our nutrition faculty members here at UD. They're making some delicious smelling vegetables in our teaching kitchen here. So did Nietzsche really say he wants to be remembered as a nutritionist?
Oh, yeah.
And what did he mean by that? And what message would he have for our many nutrition majors here at UNE?
Oh, that's funny. So yeah, Nietzsche said that, and he had an interesting relationship to food, and he was a vegetarian for a little while. But Nietzsche really believed that kind of like this stuff that happens up in our head, refined ideas and philosophy, despite the fact that he was a philosopher, is really shallow stuff compared to like the viscera, compared to what's happening in your guts and your soul. And so he was kind of trying to make that point, like what do we have to eat to feel sort of a certain sense? He called it moraline-free virtue, like the kind of virtue that isn't trapped by sort of obsessing about rules and morality, that is compelling in some other way, right? And I use that anecdote to talk about some of the cruelty that happens at restaurants, and that I think I talk about foie gras in that section.
I was going to ask you about that. It's on my list. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's, I do think like if you really look at the restaurant industry, if you really look at the food industry, the amount of suffering and cruelty is quite shocking. And since I was a food critic, I've become a vegetarian. And I really try to look out for places to eat out that serve great food where they're not killing animals in order to do so. But you basically can't do it. There's not a cruelty-free restaurant. And one of the most famous restaurants in the U.S., 11 Madison Park, went vegan maybe about 6 years ago. Okay. The chef decided he was committed to it. This is an incredibly expensive, fixed price chef serving menu, and he just went back on it, and he did it for a very interesting reason. He said, "What I realized is that just some customers weren't comfortable in a vegan restaurant." So he's like, "So no matter how amazing our food was, no matter how warm our service was, they just felt like if they couldn't maybe get some meat with that, it just didn't feel like a good meal to them." And he's like, and ultimately that's what the restaurant is about. The restaurant is about making people comfortable, bringing in a plurality of people, not making it moral and exclusive. He's like, that wasn't what I meant to do, but it kind of is what I did. And so we're going to be a little more cruel here at 11 Madison Park in order to be kind
to the people
And there's something, very interesting to me about that. And then the last thing I'll say about it, because it gets at the theme of the book, is, so Nietzsche, he lived alone almost his whole life, and he would live in these hotels in northern Italy and then Switzerland. He traveled back and forth with the seasons, never had much money. And he would eat alone, and he'd find himself getting into these conversations with strangers. And that, to him, was like the most moving experience in the restaurant, not the food. And he wrote a letter to his friend where he said, Nietzsche has these unbelievably strong opinions and theories. And he wrote to his friend, he said, if I talk to a pleasant stranger for 1 hour, he's like, I'm ready to throw all my theories out the window. Right? And that to me is like, there's a different kind of risk we can take at a restaurant, which is the risk we take anytime we enter into sort of an unpredictable, open-ended conversation. the kind that you mentioned, Sherry Turkell. That's the kind of conversation that is becoming more and more rare for us. We prefer to text where we can control
We have
it.
Control exactly what we say on the phone.
Yeah. And Nietzsche used to have those conversations all the time, and it scared him every time. And that's kind of a good thing. So that's my advice to the nutrition majors, which is just look people in the eye and have a conversation.
Sounds like good advice. You say Hannah Arendt didn't particularly care for dining out. Why not? And more broadly, how did you use some of her theory in the course of the book you put together?
Well, it's funny. I'm not sure. I'm not going to endorse that statement that she didn't like dining out. She loved to host, though.
Okay, she loved to host.
So we'll give her that. She had people over. There were a lot of cigarettes. There were cocktails. She had a nice apartment in Manhattan. But I do tell a story that she'd spent a year in Berkeley visiting, and she was very lonely there. And then she met this one guy that she connected with, not romantically, just intellectually. She was married. And they spent a day together, and she wasn't sure, like, is this going to be a friendship or not? And she sent him a letter from, you couldn't email or text back then, across the bridge from Berkeley to San Francisco, just to say, like, hey, I actually really enjoyed it, and I don't know, I don't want to intrude on your privacy, but if you'd like to hang out again. And he wrote back, and he's like, yeah, come to San Francisco. I know some great restaurants. And that was the start of this friendship, because they could go there and talk. But the big use I make of Arendt, so Arendt was, it's about this thing I was just talking about, how restaurants really are not a place to go if your primary concern is compassion. Restaurants are not about, even though there's one or two chefs who are rather famous for being unbelievable humanitarians. I'm forgetting his name, Chef Andre something, who got famous because some of his colleagues were killed in Gaza last year trying to feed people. So that's fine. But when you are at a restaurant, you're kind of not there out of compassion for anyone. You're not there to do anything about the suffering of people who like genuinely lack food, for example. You are there to do a little bit, indulge yourself, enjoy yourself. And Hannah Arendt, in writing about politics, really believed that this was an important part of human experience. There has to be a part of life where we put suffering aside, we put need and necessity aside, and we enjoy ourselves at some other level, right? And so she has this phrase, she says, sadness is not talkative in the way that gladness is talkative. And she really thought human conversation, the ability to have a plurality of perspectives, spoken and considered, and is the most valuable thing that we have. And that if human conversation gets sort of almost like bogged down in like who cares the most about suffering, it can become a little too plodding and predictable. And the restaurant is a place to sort of like to set those things aside, even though it's not necessarily the most admirable thing to do so. On a practical level, we do so. We get into more of a gladness mode for the most part, and the conversation can kind of benefit from that. So that's the sort of counterintuitive and I think really intriguing, insightful idea of Hannah Arendt. And so, yeah, I saw the restaurant as an example of a part of life where we do that. And so I thought I weaved it into the book.
Yeah, it definitely works very well the way you use it.
I appreciate it.
So as you describe in the book, we do live in an era of the celebrity chef, and you've referenced some particular chefs along the course of our conversation. Have chefs always wielded the cultural currency they seem to now, or is it heightened in our modern age? And if so, why do you think that is?
No, it's funny. It certainly feels like, let me put it this way, something happened in the 90s, turn of the century.
Yeah.
It might have partially had to do with like cable TV and the Food Network.
Anthony Bourdain
Bourdain a little bit. Yeah, it all came together. And I think there's absolutely no doubt that chefs play a role in the public imagination in the last 30 years that they didn't in the 50 years before that. Now, that being said, I read some histories of the restaurant and things, and there were chefs, especially in France, who became these public figures, became these figures that really loomed large in the culture. And so there is a tradition there. But I do think sort of the rise of the way we do media, first television, and then social media.
Yeah.
That has really accelerated that. Although, like, I don't know, everybody kept thinking it would peak, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. And I still always think it peaked, and I'm wondering if it peaked.
We'll have to stay tuned, I guess.
Yeah.
In the book, you shared that recently sociologists have used geolocation data to show that fast food restaurants, McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, you know the list, are places where members of different social classes come together and spend the most times in public these days. The writer Virgi Tovar even goes so far as to say, eating at McDonald's is a form of civic participation. That seems like a very low bar to me, especially if we order at a kiosk at the fast food place, or we order on our phone app and just show up and pick it up and sit there and eating with our kids. Do you think that characterization is a little bit of an overstatement, or is the fast food restaurant playing this democratizing role in society and bringing together the people from across the classes?
It sounds like, Josh, you're questioning the methodology of sociologists who stare at geolocation data to make overly broad claims.
And I'm asking you to defend their work, so please try.
Well, I do cite it, so I guess I should defend it. It's a really interesting article. They do try. They're very thoughtful. They do try to show that it's not just people driving up and driving away. It's like the people who go in there and spend a little time in the fast food places. They also highlight like Applebee's as a place where people spend more time. So the question is like, does it matter? Does it matter that someone with high income and someone with very low income both showed up at an Applebee's on a Tuesday? And they try to figure it out. And the way they figure it out, and this is, again, you can question the sociologists' methodology, is they look at their Facebook friends, and they look at the neighborhoods, the geographic locations of all their Facebook friends, and they find that people who rub shoulders with other social classes in these restaurants, and it might literally only be rubbing shoulders, right? You might not sit with anybody, also tend to have more Facebook friends from different social classes. So that tells you something, I think. But certainly, there is, I talk about in the book about fast food. That when we think about restaurant, if you look at the cover of my book, it's kind of like a fancy plate. I asked them not to put meat on the cover, and so the only thing they could come up with was dessert, I think, although I'm very pleased with the cover.
Strawberries and chocolate sauce.
Yeah, like a little, exactly. It looks gorgeous. I'm not criticizing the cover. But most plates have meat on them, unfortunately. But this experience that I'm describing, where you can go to a place and feel like just very comfortable there, nourished there, some of your anxieties fade away. You can have it all up and down the line of restaurants, and for some people, it really is fast food. And I cite this really fantastic book called How the Other Half Eats by this anthropologist who embedded with all these families from different social classes. And she writes about how in many low-income families, like the parents, they have to say no to their kids about so many things. And one of the things the kids want most is fast food. And they beg for it all day. And it's this thing that the parents can say, yes, yeah, we can stop at Taco Bell. And when the kid takes that bite and you just see like the pleasure hit their face and the stress fade away, it could just be incredibly satisfying. And so, and it's not a fancy experience, but, you had a nice chat with the person at the cashier, and you sat down in a clean booth, and you had this great experience. And I told you I was on a main calling, this main calling show the other day, talking about restaurants. And this woman called in, and she was just saying, like, for my family, it's Olive Garden. She's like, we love the Olive Garden. All of us will eat, and it doesn't cost much more than $100. And we just, everybody can eat their fill. And like, absolutely, like for, that too, I don't care that it's an Olive Garden and that the cooking that's happened in the kitchen is a little less refined. It can be the place where you experience that comfort. And I don't know how valuable it is that those are the places where more Americans find themselves going for that nice, comfortable meal and running into each other and seeing people from other classes. But I was intrigued enough to include that study in the book. And I think it probably, now I know I'm going on, but I'll just give one other example.
Go ahead.
So there's a famous book by Michael Pollan called The Omnivore's Dilemma.
Of course, yep.
And he describes, it's like a 500-page book describing only 4 meals. And the first meal he describes is a fast food meal that he got with his son at McDonald's, McDonald's. And then they get more and more elaborate. And the last meal is a meal that literally he either grew or hunted everything that was served on his own. And when you read that whole book, and I include some quotes from it, the one that he liked the best was the fast food. He criticizes it, but you could tell that's where he gets most poetic. It reminded him of his childhood. His son's a picky eater, and his son just loved the fries. And he can see that, like, oh, he's creating the kinds of memories I had about it. He remembers, like, fighting his sisters off for the French fries and stuff. It's the meal that meant the most to him, even though Pollan is just like an absolute famous food snob. And to me, that's kind of interesting and telling.
Absolutely. So you mentioned your main public radio, main calling appearance, and I imagine you've done some other podcasts. Are you enjoying promoting the book, or are you getting a little tired of talking about restaurants?
I have to say, like, compared to this book is much less dense political theory than I've written in the past, and it's selling more. That's nice.
That's always nice. We'll take that.
And it is this like, people really like to talk about restaurants, and it's been, I've kind of enjoyed it. Like, I do think, like, I don't meet people who don't, like, occasionally nod their head and say, like, yeah, there is something really special about it. And also the anxiety side, people who know what it's like to be at a restaurant and things are going wrong and it's going to cost you a mint. And you're like, oh my God, this place was so hyped, but this, blah, blah, blah. And it's this experience that everybody has. It really means something to people. And so far I've enjoyed it. And I enjoyed this chat.
Oh, well, thanks for saying so. What are you working on next? Do you have a new book idea or a new article you're writing?
So, as I mentioned, like, I don't know if I mentioned, I write really long, and these books, as you mentioned, are short. And so there's a lot of ideas that I didn't put in the book. And there's sort of a really major theme that I had in the initial draft that it was threatening to take over the book, and I just took it out. And so I think I'm going to work on a follow-up book that is still about nourishment, still about care, a little bit about the restaurant, but not exclusively about the restaurant, that gets into this idea that a conversation that occurs in the context of feeling nourished, cared for, relaxed has this unique ability to be transformative. And this book looks at that idea with a special focus on gender. And it builds on the idea that a lot of our ideas about gender were formed in the context of being a child, being cared for, almost always by a woman. Most of us are mother raised for the most part. And it has a lot to do with what we think of as, like, this is what it is to be a man, or this is what it is to be a woman, but also, like, a really deep personal experience of gender, whether we compulsively care about what other people want or whether we kind of are like, I don't care about that stuff. And so I'm working on a book that really expands on that idea.
Sounds interesting.
Thanks.
Well, Brian Duff, I've really enjoyed our chat today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
That's it for this episode of Oh the Humanities. As always, thanks for listening. And feel free to tell us what you thought of this conversation on the CGH social media channels: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X.